Let's begin with a blessing of Refuah Shlema V'Kreva, a complete and full recovery to all and anyone that may be suffering from the virus. They should completely be healed and come back to their homes, and or if they are in their homes. And the rest of us, Hashem should protect us from this pandemic, and we should be able to celebrate only simchas going into Pesach and to the Gula Amitis V'Ashlem. So it's an honor to share a few words here, primarily because the most important thing I think that needs to be stated is our role. What is our role today? A lot of people are very fearful, even panicky, hysterical, for many good reasons. There are a lot of unknowns. This virus has attacked everybody all over the world. People don't know what will be tomorrow, and that uncertainty creates a lot of unsettling feelings. On the other hand, to escape into some type of religious fantasy that all we need is betochen, and that will save all our problems, is also not the way Hashem and the Torah says. The Torah says you have to look at doctors, you have to listen to authorities, you have to listen to Rabbonim. So how do we find the proper balance between, on one hand, being prudent and careful and cautious, and like they're telling us now to stay home and quarantine? That's why we're doing this, because you're all home. School is closed here and everywhere. And at the same time, not to panic and not to become in any way emotionally overwhelmed by all of this. So thank God, specifically I say Jews in general, and particularly Chassidim, and particularly Chabad Chassidim, we have a Rebbe. And we were trained, we were taught. In many ways, we were trained exactly for times like this. Remember, in the 3,800 years of Jewish history, this is not the first time we've had a crisis. We've had far worse crises. I'm not comparing them. Every crisis is a crisis. But if we talk about, today's Chodesh Nissan, we're going mamish into the month of Geula, Nissan. 3,800 years ago, Pari, Rahman al-Islam, was bathing in the blood. I'm not 38, I'm sorry, 3,300 years ago, Pari was bathing in the blood of Jewish children. Jews were being killed, genocide, in bondage, overworked. It was a Holocaust. And yet, we came through it. As we will say in the Haggadah in 2 weeks, V'hi she'amda lanu, V'hi, the amunah, the faith that Jews had, and V'hi, the promise Hashem made, Havtoche, withstood and helped us endure that. We came out, became a greater nation. And you go through our history, this is our story. We've been through challenge after challenge. And not only did they not weaken, we became stronger. So that's an overall statement. And it's indicated in the Pasuk, in the beginning of Parsha Shmos, when it talks about the oppression of the Jews. It's a very powerful Pasuk. Keshayano esam ken yirbe v'chen yifretz. As they were oppressed, in direct proportion to that, they flourished and they thrived. You imagine? Not only did they survive, they thrived, they flourished. And this has been our story. After Golus Mitzrayim, we came out, became a great nation. We went to Eretz Yisrael, 40 years of challenges. In Eretz Yisrael, there were challenges. We built the first Beis HaMikdash. The Babylonians destroyed it. We built the second Beis HaMikdash, and we went through the Persian Golus. Then and Purim, the story of Purim, which we're coming from, again, almost total genocide, Rahman al-Islam, men, women, and children. And we were saved from that. Then came the second Beis HaMikdash, stories and challenges, Hanukkah, and then finally the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash by the Romans. And here we are now in Golus, almost 2,000 years. And we've gone through everything, the Crusaders, the Inquisitions, the pogroms, and ultimately the Holocaust itself, just 70, 80 years ago. So when we talk about Jews as a people, we are the living witnesses of not just survival, but how we get through everything. How did they do that, the Jews? What was the formula? The formula was that on one hand, they were practical and prudent. They had to deal with their challenges, and they didn't ignore them, but they always held on to something greater, and that's the Hisha Amdalanu, the bracha, the haftacha rather, the promise, and the amunah, the faith that we are a people that God protects and watches. And even though we go through challenges, And even though we suffer, we don't become sufferers, because we see ourselves as agents of change. And that brings me to today. We're now in 2020, in Tafshin Pei. It's 70 years from the Rebbe's leadership. It's 100 years, which I'll talk about in a moment, from the Rebbe Rashab's Yartzeit, Istalkus tonight, Beis Nissan. 100 years from when the Friedrich Rebbe assumed leadership right after the Rebbe Rashab, Istalkus. And we are Chassidim of the Rebbe. We are the Rebbe's soldiers. So think of an army that's fighting a battle. So sometimes it's going very well, you're winning your battles, and you forge ahead, you're conquering territory, you're doing whatever you have to do. Then there's a setback. Whatever reason, there's a setback. It could be the enemy attacks, it could be a pandemic, a disease, whatever. So what is the approach when people who are in the army, when something like that happens? So you have people who become immediately terrified, and they run away from the front line. They say, you know what? As long as the war was going easily, I'm here. But as soon as there's a challenge, I'm out of this. There are others who are reckless, and they say, just forge ahead. We have to fight the war. But there's a sakana, because either there's an epidemic, or because you're vulnerable or fragile. What is the right approach? The right approach is, what does a commander-in-chief do? Commander-in-chief says, look, we have a setback, we have a challenge, but our destination is still the same. Our goal is the same. We now have to adjust momentarily to figure out how to navigate properly. So we don't retreat, but we also don't just jump into the fire. We have to be careful, but we never give up, because we're still marching ahead in this long march. This muscle that I'm sharing with you is, see the Rebbe as the commander-in-chief. We're the soldiers. And we were told by the Rebbe 70 years ago that this is the Deir Hashvi, the seventh generation from the Alter Rebbe. And just like the seventh generation from Avram Avinu, Moshe Rabbeinu, made v'osili migdash v'shechanti b'seicham. He brought the Shekhinah back down to earth and built a sanctuary out of silver, gold, silver, copper, and all the materials. A place where Shechanti b'seichem, God resides among us, within us. Same thing here, the Rebbe said. We are the seventh generation, not due to our work, not due to our choice. That's how Hashem made it. And we will bring the Shekhinah, that the Alter Rebbe, Chassidus Chabad, and before the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid, and before that, all the generations of tzaddikim and leaders, we will bring the Shekhinah back down below in Moshiach's coming in this seventh generation. That's what the Rebbe's marching orders, the commander-in-chief. Now we're 70 years later. We all thought it was going to be a lot smoother, to be honest. Before Gimel Tammuz, that the Rebbe would lead us into the Geula. But there have been some setbacks. There have been some concealments. So what is the approach of a true chassid? The approach is, some people can say, I give up. Okay, it's over. God forbid. Others can say, nothing changed. We march ahead. We ignore everything. The approach is, no, we do not ignore everything. We understand there's a challenge. Right now, we're told we have to stay in our homes. It's reckless to go out and do things that can expose you or expose others to any illness. The same Eibishter told us that. That's the situation. But that doesn't mean the war is over. That doesn't mean that we retreat. It means we adjust. It's like any smart swimmer. When there's a storm, you don't just swim against the tide. You allow yourself to adjust, to navigate, but we never for one moment waver from the destination. We will reach Moshiach. Setback here, setback there. And that's what we are charged with. And this is what I want to share with you. I think it's the most important message for every one of you. Not just for the elder chassidim and for the great leaders and so on. For every one of us. And that is, you are chosen by Hashem to be here in this time. Not your great-grandparents, but you. You're living now in the year 2020, Tafshin Pei, Rosh Chodesh Nissan. And why are you here? Because you were charged with a mission. At this time, more than ever, we have to rise to the occasion and show leadership. When I say leadership, doesn't mean you suddenly have to become the president of the United States. Leadership means each one of you in your own way, in your homes, with your friends, online, however you're communicating, however you're interacting, can't just be talking. It's not just regular business as usual. We have to increase in more light and show, not only are we not afraid of this, but we're going to be kinder people, gentler people, do an extra mitzvah, be nicer to our parents, be nicer to our siblings, reach out to someone who may be in need, volunteer in any way that you can. Obviously, all according to what the Rabbonim and the halachic and the medical experts telling us to do. And we're not, one thing for sure, we cannot be neutral and apathetic. You could say, 1 second, I'm just a high school student. Who am I? I'm nobody. No. You are here in this generation now. And the generations to come, Moshiach will come very shortly. Generations to come. One day you'll have children and grandchildren. And they will ask you, what happened in 2020? And you'll be able to say proudly, we didn't sit by and wait and just cry and we're scared. We did whatever we could to bring a little more light into the world. There's so many opportunities today. I see it for myself. The last 2 weeks, I've been nonstop teaching, speaking to people, counseling people, just trying to give people, there's the physical health, but there's also psychological and emotional and spiritual health. A lot of people are very, very depressed. They can't go to work. Some people tell me, I can't even say hello to the elevator man that I used to say every morning. And people are starting to miss seemingly very basic things. Very basic things we're missing. We took for granted a lot. Everything was going so well and so smooth and everything was beautiful. Thank God. But now we suddenly don't take for granted so much. Little gestures, little exchanges, an extra hello matters so much. When's the last time we sat down together and we could just sit and bring together physically? That's not meant to be right now. So, but that doesn't take anything away from our mission. So you are all right now. This is what we were trained for. Our whole lives, we were trained for moments like this. So I'm doing everything I can. I'll just give you an example. I mentioned it yesterday to the 9th and 10th grade. I'm doing a lot of new things, but I started a daily video called Your Daily Spiritual Antidote. A 3-minute video that gives people inspiration and bolsters, we'll call it their emotional and psychological resources, immunity. To focus on our inner lives and how we counter the challenges that the coronavirus is presenting us. And it's taken off virally, no pun intended. And it's something that you can simply go if you want to get it. It's easy. It's on WhatsApp. It's all over the place. Go to meaningfullife.com or chassidusapplied.com, and you'll find that if you're interested in it. And it's very easy to share. Yes. But what did I do? I basically was trained by the Rebbe that when there's a challenge, you have to add something. So I added this to give people strength. I just started 3 days ago. But there's hundreds of things. If you're creative, you can come up with ideas. But you have to care and feel this is the reason we're here now. As I said, we're trained for this moment. That's point number 1. I'm going to take your questions and I'm going to address them all. I just want to make one more point, very important point. What this teaches us, what's happening now, that if you ever had the illusion that you control your life, you suddenly realize we don't control our lives. Who would have thought a month ago, 3 weeks ago, Purim, that we'd be sitting now in this situation that we're in now, that you can't go out of your home, or even if you could go, it's with limitations. You can't go to school. All our routines have suddenly been upended, have been disrupted. The whole world is destabilized, and not one group, 8 billion people. Who would have thought? But you know what it teaches us? Number 1 is that we're not in control. We didn't write the script. I was going to be Pesach at a program somewhere, and it's all over. We didn't write the script. The Eibishter has his own narrative. So what do we control? We only control one thing. We only control one thing. Can someone mute that? Like I said, here the Eibishter has this plan. Can you hear me? Okay, good. We don't control what happened to us, but you know what we control? How we're going to react. Our attitude. That's completely in our control. As I said before, we don't control the middle of a battle or a war or swimming in the water where there'll be a storm. But a good swimmer controls how we're going to navigate. We control our attitude. We can control our optimism. We control our self-control. That we do control. So let's look at a posuk that took place as I said, a little more than 3,300 years ago. I would say 3,332 years ago exact, when the Jews left Mitzrayim, after 210 years of a bitter golus. So we read in the Psukim that what happened the night when they left Mitzrayim. So Moshe tells the Eden that Hashem spoke to him and told him that you are going to leave tomorrow afternoon. You're going to march out of this golus. But tonight I want you to bring a Paschal lamb, a Korban Pesach, and I want you to smear the blood on the mezuzahs, on the sides of the doors. And then I want you to stay in your house. He says, Va'atem, al teitzu ish mepesach beisei ad boiker. You should not leave your home, the door of your home, until the morning. Why? Says Rashi, because that night was Makas Pcheres. After the 9 plagues, the final plague, the Mitzrayim were like Nazis. They refused to let the Jews go. So finally came the worst of the 10 plagues, was striking the firstborn of every house in Mitzrayim. That night must have been, who knows, it was an epidemic, a pandemic. There was no home that did not have someone, Rahman al-Islam, that the imbais below mess. And the Jews were said, stay inside, because outside is now an epidemic. Stay inside. Now you could think the Jews, what they do when they were inside their homes, they were cowering in fear and peeking out the window. What's going on? No, they were celebrating. They were celebrating the first Pesach in history. They were celebrating and eating the Korban Pesach with them and their families. And they said, finally, after hundreds of years, we're getting out of this God-forsaken place. They were celebrating because they knew God is protecting them. But now it's in the house. The day will come, they can leave their homes and then celebrate in the streets and celebrate everywhere. What does this teach us? That there's a time for everything. There's a time where Hashem wants us to celebrate on a big suda, a big meal in great big gatherings, physically. And there's a time Hashem says, I want you to stay home and celebrate there. Fortify and intensify your connections with your parents, with your siblings, with yourself, with friends, through online or other ways like we're doing now. Find ways to become a stronger Jew, a stronger chassid, more committed. Realize that we don't take for granted our blessings. Realize, like I said, we don't control the circumstances, but we control what we're going to do within these circumstances. Okay. So now I want to share one story, and then I'm going to go over to the questions that you've asked. 100 years ago, I mentioned that Rebbe Rashab's Istalkus. How did he pass away? B'derech hateva, from another disease. There was an epidemic then. It was called typhus. It was a horrible disease that created a very high fever in people, very contagious. The Rebbe Rashab unfortunately contracted it a few weeks before his Istalkus, and then Hashem took him. Very tragic, very sad. We have documentation of those sad moments, the last few days of the Rebbe Rashab's life in this world. The Frierdiker Rebbe, of course, is the Ben Yochid, the only single son of the Rebbe Rashab, and he assumed leadership. He sat Shiva, and then he stood up from Shiva, and he became the new Rebbe. But then he also was struck with typhus. And the Chassidim were frantic, because here the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, a young man, at the time the Frierdiker Rebbe was 40 years old. He was born Tafresh Mem, Tafresh Pei. And he's now in bed, literally in almost a comatose state, high fever, and delirious. The Frierdiker Rebbe was not in a healthy place. The Chassidim were davening because they didn't need another tragedy on their hands. And they went and they were in Mispal and prayed, and they went to the Ragat Shover Gon. Listen to this story, it's unbelievable. The Ragat Shover Gon was Rabbi Yosef Rosen. Okay, and he was a famous scholar, a famous prodigy, Rabbi Yosef Rosen, and he came from Chassidish background, family. So they asked him for advice, they asked him for a bracha. So he told them something interestingly. He was a Baal Migla. He said once, the Tzemach Tzedek gave me a bracha to be Nigla, what should I do? Meaning not Chassidus. But he knew plenty of Chassidus, trust me. So he said to them these words. He said in Halacha, according to Jewish law, when you want to kasher something, we know now, we're going to Pesach, you want to kasher an oven. You can't just wash it with soap. You have to burn it. You have to heat it up to temperatures that become white hot, and that's considered changing its mitzias. So if it was treif, Rachman al-San, or was not kosher lePesach, it now becomes an entity that is kosher. Why do you need the heat? Because the heat burns it out, and a pitera is the only way to transform an entity from one state to another state. Just washing it cleans it, but it doesn't change it. So this is what the Jacobson told them. He said, typhus is high fever, to the point like white hot fever. That when the Frierdiker Rebbe till now was a son of a Rebbe. He was a chassid of a Rebbe. Now that he has to become a new mitzias, a Rebbe, he's going through a state of typhus, of a state of high temperature fever, to transform him from becoming a chassid to becoming a Rebbe. Now, this was, at the time, the Frierdiker Rebbe was in danger, and doctors had to deal with it. But this is how a Jew thinks. That at the time, yes, of course, the Ragachova said you have to listen to the doctors. But in a deeper way, everything that happens is a transition. We are now also going through one of the symptoms of coronavirus, or COVID-19 as they call it, is high fever and fever. Now, Baruch Hashem, thank God for most of us, we haven't been affected by it. But those that are have that. So you can say in a certain way that at the end of the day, the way we look at it, not that it's a bracha, God forbid, we never asked for it, we don't want it. But at the end of the day, it teaches us that everything is a transition. At the end of the day, we hope and we pray that this will lead us into a new world where we'll finally have Moshiach, and our world, the entire earth, will be healed in a perfect way, individually and collectively. I just wanted to give perspective as a Chassidish perspective where we should be and how we should be projecting now. We should be communicating these messages to our friends, to people who are maybe weak or are resigned or frustrated or overwhelmed or even panicky. We have to demonstrate that type of fortitude and strength because we are the soldiers trained for this time. And this time will judge us in a real way. How did you rise to the occasion? And we could say proudly, we rose to the occasion, we had classes, we spoke, we inspired each other, we became, we're not perfect human beings, no one's asking for perfection. But each one of you has to look into your heart and say, what could I do now? Remember, this is not a simple time. It's a time that's affecting a wake-up call to every person on earth. What could I do now to add a little godliness, a little elikus, a little teda, a little chassidus, another kapitel tilim, another mitzvah, another act of kindness and goodness? What could I do? If every one of us approaches it that way every day, we will have brought healing in the most powerful way, because teda and mitzvahs also brings healing to the world. We need the medicines, we need the doctors, we need all the health professionals, but there's also another part of health, and that is the spiritual, psychological, and emotional health. Okay, with that, I'm going to go. I have a bunch of questions that were sent in by you beforehand, and as we said, I will try to answer as many as I can. I'll bunch them together, and in addition to that, at the end, we'll hopefully have some time to take questions from you that you can chat, and I'll try to address some of them as well. Okay. So again, an honor to be with you. You are the Noshim, Bonis Tzidkonius of our generation, the people that Rebbe appointed as being the leaders that will lead us all as we march out of Golus into Gul. So now I'm reading questions from these Bonis Tzidkonius. Okay, so let's start with the first question. What is actually going to happen when Moshiach comes? What will the logistics be like? And I see, and I must say, just yesterday as well, the 9th and 10th grade, many of the questions about Moshiach, and I have to say I'm very impressed. I thought people would be asking, what can I do not to be fearful? What can I do to stay healthy? Why is God doing this? And I'm sure there's some questions like that, but a lot of questions have been about Moshiach. So I have to say, I see Moshiach is on your minds, which is great because that's what the Rebbe taught us. So what is actually going to happen when Moshiach comes? What will the logistics be like? I'm just going to read there's a few others that are, another question similar. Will the world be drastically different? Excuse me. will the world be drastically different when Moshiach comes? Or will it be similar to how it is just with people who will be conscious of Hashem? And will we still have a normal day-to-day life like going to school, work? When Moshiach comes, will we move to Eretz Yisrael as in where it is today, or the whole world become Eretz Yisrael? Once Moshiach comes, what's the goal? What would everyone be working toward? Okay. Another Mashiach-related question is, I'm terrified for the coming of Mashiach and feel like I don't want it to come. Although my life has been many challenges, I still feel like this. I appreciate the highs more because of the lows. A life where there is absolutely no struggle and seemingly no goal sounds like a nightmare to me. The concept of living forever absolutely terrifies me. I struggle with the thoughts that I don't want Mashiach to come. I know that sounds terrible. I still want Mashiach as an idea. I know it's the goal of the entire world. Al-Lakus will be completely revealed. I want so much and work towards it as I'm a chassid, but it feels like I want idealistically. When I think about the actual impacts it will have on our lives, I feel like I don't want it at all. How do I grapple with this? Okay, there is a selection. I didn't even read them all about Mashiach. So let me answer them in one fell swoop, one overall answer that hopefully answers this and many other questions. And I just want to say that it's not unrelated to events now, but we'll address that a little later. The Rebbe, as I said earlier, promised us, not just promised us, he made it very clear that we're at the end of a process. And the process is going to end with Geula Amitis Vashlei Mashiach. The problem is, many of us have no clue, what does that mean? What means Geula? What means Mashiach? When I was a child, they told us ice cream will grow on trees. Okay, who doesn't want ice cream? Free ice cream. I got a little older. I realized it's not so simple. I even asked my teacher. He said he thought that would be exciting. So what exactly is Mashiach and Geula? So let me give a very simple explanation. And I hope it will also calm down the questioner who asked what that was terrified of it and make it a little more realistic than just fantasy. In simple English, let's take an example. You build a machine. An engineer builds a machine, a computer. Okay, it's a complex machine. You come home with a new computer. You have an operator's manual, and it says, here's what you do to make this computer work. Here's how you take care of it. Here's how you watch it. Here's what you don't do. You don't pour water on it. You don't put it into extra heat. Okay? Now, the same thing is with life. Life is a machine. Who is the engineer of this machine? Hashem. Hashem created a machine. It's called life, your life, my life, the entire world's life, all of existence. And it has rules. And he said, here are the things to do that makes your machine work well. Just like a doctor would tell you, these are healthy foods, vitamins, nutrients, different aspects that make you a healthier person. And here are the things you shouldn't do. Don't eat poison. Don't do something destructive. Exercise. That makes your machine work better. So the Torah is the operator's manual, and it's telling us how we should use our machines individually and collectively to the best possible way. What is Moshiach? Moshiach is when the machine will be working at its peak performance because it followed all the guidelines. Golus is when the machine could be a little broken here or broken there and not complete at its complete potential. Moshiach is basically the fulfillment and realization that the purpose for which you and I were created is fulfilled. When you do a mitzvah, when you do a good act, a kind act, you know what you're behaving? You're behaving Mashiach-dik. Why? Because you're aligning yourself with the way Hashem wants you to be. That's why when we talk about Geula, you've, I'm sure, learned many times. The word Geula and the word Goyla come from the same root. Gimel, Vav, Lamed, Hey. Only difference is one letter. Aleph. So Goyla is a world, the world we know today, wherever you live, your home and so on. And Geula is the same world, but it adds an Aleph. What's the Aleph? Aleph is the Aleph of Alufei Shalelom, the master of the world. Aleph is Achdus, Hashem Echad, Aleph. We bring the unity, the divine unity of Hashem into Goyla, and the world becomes Geula. I remember a Farbrengen in 1991. It was Shabbos Parshas Achrei Kdeshim. And the Rebbe began the Farbrengen with a smile. He said that he's receiving letters from people who say they're afraid of the Geula. Why? Because when the Geula comes, what will happen to everything I built up in this world? Everything I built up will be gone. What will be gone? My business, my equity, the money I made. I mean, there's so many things will be built up, will be gone. So the Rebbe answered, don't be afraid. When Moshiach comes, nothing will be gone. Something will only be added. Because it's Gela with an Aleph. Everything you built in this world, your families, your homes, your belongings, your possessions, all your acquisitions, all will be there, but it will be seen not as an end in itself, but you'll see the Hashem, the Elokus in it. You'll see how it's all created to serve God. Or in the words of the Rambam, Lo yiyeh esek kol ha'elam elo ladas es Hashem bilvad. That the entire business of the world will be to know God. Now, what does that mean? So I'm going to give two examples. One, it may sound strange to you, but you'll see it's a beautiful example taken from a letter from the Rebbe. It's about a dry cleaners. Dry cleaners. Of all things are dry cleaners. You all use cleaners. You take your clothing to cleaners from time to time. So the Rebbe writes a letter to a person who owned the cleaners. And the Rebbe said, everything is Ashgacha Pratis. Everything is Ashgacha Pratis, which means everything is a lesson in life. So here's the question. What is the lesson from cleaners? And the Rebbe answers in his letter following. He said, what is the Chiddush? What is the innovation of a cleaners? You buy a garment. You buy a new garment. You buy a new dress. Now Pesach is coming. Hopefully you'll have something new. You wear it once, you're excited, twice, 3 times. After a while, it gets wrinkled, it gets soiled, gets dirty. And after a while, if you're a balabatisha person, you're a person who's a mensch, you can't wear clothing like that. So you think you have to throw it out. No. Comes the innovation of cleaners and says the following. What does cleaners say? That all you have to do is take it to the cleaners. The cleaners takes the garment, immerses it in water, and warm water, not just cold water, warm water, mixes it with chemicals that get rid of the stains and the smudges and so on. And then takes it out, dries it, puts it under a heavy press, and voila, now you have the garment like new, and you could repeat this process many times. What's the lesson that Rebbe says? Listen to this lesson. We say every morning in davening, Neshama shenasata bi taherehi. The soul you've given me is pure, like a pure garment. But then life takes over. We're disappointed, we're hurt, we lose hope. We could be sometimes, God forbid, abused. People can insult us. Many things in life make the soul feel soiled, wrinkled, and in some ways dirtied, contaminated, polluted. So you think, okay, too late. No, comes the cleaners and teaches us. Take the neshama, the soul, and immerse it in water. Ein mayim ela teira. Teira is water. Water is refreshing. When you immerse yourself in learning, it refreshes you and reinvigorates you. It inspires you. But not just plain water, warm water, passion, feeling, warmth. Cold water could be indifferent, apathetic, coldness. Warm water, warmth, Varmkeit. And you mix chemicals. Every mitzvah is another chemical. The chemicals take care of you, lighting candles, Shabbos, kashrus, and so on. Every mitzvah gets rid of another one of the stains. And then you know what you do? You take the garment, the neshama, and you put it under Kabbalah's El, Malchus Shamayim. What's Kabbalah's El mean? Accepting the yoke. Yoke is like a heavy load. Being accountable to a higher authority. So Kabbalah's El is accepting the yoke, which means taking your life and committing, like I said, to the commander-in-chief, to your purpose, your mission, your cause, your calling. And then your neshama is refreshed, tahirihi, like new. That's why we say it every morning. So besides the beautiful lesson Let me bring it back to Moshiach. So when I read this letter, interestingly, I remember I took a walk up Kingston Avenue. And I started looking at all the cleaners. There's a cleaner on almost every block. And I saw the cleaners in a new light. Till now, cleaners was a place, when I needed it, you go to the cleaners, and who thinks about it? But now I realized that Rebbe gave us a way of looking at a cleaners. This is what it will look like when Moshiach comes. That a cleaners will be a lesson, a teacher teaching us about renewing your neshama. And the same thing will be with science and with art and with music and with ice cream shops and with bakeries and groceries. The world will be the same world, but the world will testify and say, I am here to teach you something about God. I am here to inspire you to be a better person. So the world will be permeated with its purpose. Now, this means for us, very practical. You and I can do something about it right now. When we look at the world around us, when you look at your home, when you look at your parents, your families, whatever the situation is, and you bring a little aleph of Aluf Shalelim into it, what you've done is you brought a little Geula, a little Mashiach into this world. 33 years ago, Tov Shem Mem Zayin, the Rebbe came out with the campaign that every child and every student, besides every man and woman, adult, should make from their home a mikdash ma'at, a small sanctuary. The Rebbe spelled it out. That children in their rooms, they should take their room and have a siddur there, a chumash, a tehillim, a haggadah, the Rebbe mentioned before Pesach, a tzedakah pushka. By doing that, you make your room not just a room where you sleep, where you play, where you have shelter, a room that's part of your family's home, but you turn it into a Beis HaMikdash, a small mini Beis HaMikdash. And the Rebbe said everybody can do that. When you do that, you've made your room a little more Mashiachic. When all this accumulates, if each one of us does that, then you have the general Mashiach. So to now go back to the questions, I know I went a little longer, but I wanted to do it to be able to answer all the questions. What is actually going to happen when Mashiach comes? The logistics. Well, there's logistics about how will we serve God and so on. But most importantly, what I wanted to address is what will our daily lives look like? A life that's focused. The machine is doing what the creator of the machine told us to do. And that will be collective, that the whole world will be following that. So whenever you see, I'm just going through the questions to make sure I answered them all. Will it be drastically different? Well, you got the answer. Now, just to qualify, in case you're wondering, you say, what about Chiyas HaMesim? What about going to Eretz Yisrael, Beis HaMikdash? So there's different kufas, there's different stages. What I described was the main change, a change in consciousness, a change in awareness, in focus. That instead of materialism being an end in itself, it'll be a means toward the divine. Look right now. You know how many people, and I can tell you, testify in first person, how many people have told me, secular people, they say, you know what? What a wake-up call. Yesterday I thought my biggest power and control was my money, the stock market, my business, my company, the people I work with. I realize now my biggest strength is inside. That's exactly what this has done. It's shown people that the physical Gashmisdika world has no purpose of its own unless it's driven by a higher purpose. So now, of all times, the best time to focus on Mashiach Dika ideas. You just have to demystify it and make it practical. And I more specifically focused on the things we can do. Chiyas HaMesim will happen. There are many things that are going to happen. I don't want to go into that so much because you can learn that. I was focusing most, what can we do now and what will it look like? And you have to be able to envision in your mind. Here's a good opportunity right now. We all have some more extra time at home. Write down on a piece of paper, what do you think the Geula is going to look like in your life? What will your home look like? What will the street look like? And so on. The more we envision it, the more we can make it happen. You cannot make something happen that you can't even imagine. So can we fully imagine everything? No. But in a small way, we can bring that aleph into our lives. I had yesterday a question. I don't know if there's a question. Someone asked the question. I'm cooped up now in my house with my parents and my siblings. And it's only bringing more frustrations out. Because I get nervous and I start yelling. How could I avoid control? How could I avoid insulting my parents or my siblings when I'm very, very frustrated? So here's a perfect example of a geula dika look and a golas dika. You can give into your base emotions and just behave in a very obnoxious way. Or, you know what, when you feel that way, say to yourself, this is not a time to be hurting people or insulting people. Go into a private room, maybe call a friend or text with someone you know, and vent, and come back and hug your parent, if that's allowed now under the circumstances. Hug your sibling. So express more love. Say, how can I help? This, in a small way, is how someone who brings the aleph into the picture, instead of succumbing and allowing your emotions to get control of you, we're adults. You say, well, I can't control. I'm not saying we're not perfect. I'm not suggesting everybody can do this. But everybody can exercise a little more self-control, and especially in this time when we all need it. People are weaker. People are more demoralized. People can't go to work. There's a lot of concerns. What will be with my job? What will be with income? It's not a time to create more tension than necessary. And each of us has control over that. You just have to want. And as I said, you get too frustrated, we all get frustrated. So go into another room, find yourself a way to vent. Express it in some other way. Okay. Will we move to Eretz Yisrael? Yes, we will ultimately. It could be immediate, it could be a short while. But ultimately, the day, the whole world, yes, will be like Eretz Yisrael. That's what it says in the Midrash. Now, you ask, what will be the goal once Moshiach comes? Once we've done this, one writer writes, I'm terrified. We have nothing to do. We'll have plenty to do. You know why? Because if good is better, not better. Today, the challenge is to get out of a state of concealment and a state of an unhealthy state and make the machine healthy again. Then the machine will be humming along and growing and growing and growing. Yelchu mechayel al chayel. So we'll constantly be going to think of love. If you love somebody, so there's a state sometimes you and the person that you love are having a difficult time. So fine, you work it out, and now you love each other. You'll say, okay, what do we do now? Now that we love each other and we agree, what work is there to do? Think of the question. In other words, is there only work to be done when people don't love each other and then they have to fight until they work it out? When you do love each other, two people who really love each other say, okay, we go on a journey together. Let's study together. Let's grow together. Love can always go deeper. You show me someone who's in love, and they'll tell you, I reached my peak. I can't love anymore. Is there such a thing that a parent should say, no, I used up the quota of love for my children. I have nothing more to give. Love is endless. And the same thing is with our love of Hashem, our love of godliness. When something is in a very healthy place and we work on it properly, then there comes a point where it can only get healthier and healthier. So today we're fighting with a disease, with an epidemic, and we're trying to get healthy. But once we're healthy, it could always get healthier and healthier. So Geula is a process of growing, except we won't be fighting good, won't be fighting evil. It'll be good or better, or even better and better and better and better. Okay. I think I covered this. Regarding the one who wrote about being terrified, I think there's more issues here than just Moshiach. I think you need to speak to someone, and I think this is good advice for all of us, especially today. You have to have a mentor, a mashpia, or a friend that you could speak to. And if there are things that are terrifying you or scaring you or frightening you, whether it's for now because of the virus or it's in general in your life. Remember, a lot of people a month ago were also not in a great emotional place. So this could only make it worse. So it's a time right now to reach to someone that you can speak to, that you can trust, that can be kind. And the same thing for all of us here who can be that person to another, a friendly voice, a sympathetic ear, someone that they can lean on, that you can talk to. It's very powerful communion. Today our communion has to be with social distancing, but remember, social distancing doesn't mean spiritual distancing. Social distance, physically we cannot be in the same proximity, but soulfully and spiritually we should be even more connected than ever. That's the point I was making throughout this talk. The point to make even more connections, finding even deeper ways to show love and kindness and connectedness to each other. Because remember, on the neshama level, we're all one, and now's an opportunity to let that shine forth. Let me go to a few more questions. Is it right to try to find proofs of Mashiach coming from random details of Corona? Although we should try to learn from everything, it doesn't seem respectful to prove something the Rebbe has already told us based on the name, gematria, or translation of the virus. Could there be any truth to that, to them, or is it just bored people on WhatsApp? I have to always say, I love the questions coming from students. They're very irreverent and direct, and it's very refreshing. So I'm glad that you could write this way, and I encourage you to ask questions without gloves, without the diplomacy. Just say it as it is. It's very important. I, for one, commend you, not just commend you, encourage you. I know some people are afraid, but don't be afraid, especially in this time. So I'll be as blunt as you ask the question. Yeah, I don't like to say bored people on WhatsApp, but there are definitely people who are not really clear-minded and become desperate. There's a certain, the word sensationalism. Some people gravitate to sensationalism. They see a fly by in the sky. Oh, it's a sign of something. They see a cloud in the sky. We all know hashgacha pratis. We all believe and understand everything is divine providence. But especially for a Chabad chassid, we have to have a little balance here. Today people tell me the coronavirus, they found a medrash that says that before Moshiach comes, there's going to be a big plague. That same person, I reminded him, told me 2 months ago that when the economy is good, it's a sign of Medani Mitziyim Ka'afer, Moshiach is coming. So I say, look, every time something happens, it's a sign of Moshiach. I can find you a medrash for everything. When things are good, it's a sign of Moshiach. When things are bad, it's a sign of Moshiach. If there's a war, there's a sign of Moshiach. When there's peace, there's a sign of Moshiach. When we're prosperous, there's a sign of Moshiach. When we're poor, there's a sign of Moshiach. Is it all true? Everything is true, but there's context here. The context is, as I said at the outset, it makes total sense that Eibishter created a world and we know Moshiach will come. And yes, we're closer than ever before. Are there signs? There probably are. But to start going and nitpicking and saying, Corona, here, sign Moshiach. So anyone that's a little intelligent begins to say, this is ridiculous. Every time something happens, there we go, another sign. Frankly, we all would have preferred the coronavirus didn't even come. Why couldn't Moshiach come without the coronavirus? We have to fulfill every medrash. Let them be fulfilled by ruchnius. They don't have to all be fulfilled by gashmis. And if you're going to go through every medrash to be grateful fulfilled, Rahman al-Islam, you know how many more things have to happen? My point is that, yes, we believe Moshiach is going to come. We have to be responsible, mature human beings, do whatever it takes. So no, running around and looking for proofs and saying, if it's a little, I wouldn't call it bored people, I'd call it immaturity. It's somewhat immature. It's like grabbing onto to some type of crutch, grabbing onto a desperate attempt. So I think it has to be in context. And the context is, yes, Mashiach's going to come. Everything is going in that direction. Right now, instead of looking for signs, what we have to do is, how could I use this time that we're now secluded at home and we're challenged in different ways to be a better person? If you told me that you found in Medrash, that I say, absolutely, go for it. How can we be a better person, bring more light to the world, overcome this challenge, bring more confidence, come into Pesach with some form of celebration as much as we're able to, in the best possible way? That's our true responsibility. Now, if you do that and someone throws out a remez that says, listen, I gave a talk on Corona, that Corona comes from the word crown, keser. So yes, of course there's remozim and you can find hints and so on. But that comes only after and coupled with a responsible attitude to the entire picture. And that's why you see by the Rebbe, you see, yes, when the Persian Gulf War, the Rebbe said a medrash that it was a sign of Mashiach. So first of all, the Rebbe is a Rebbe. And when the Rebbe says it, it's his authority. Secondly, the Rebbe didn't say it every day. Every time something happened, he said, the Rebbe was context. The whole world is a better place, and part of it is also some of these signs. Okay, everyone is saying, next question, that all these tzaros happening now are signs of the coming of Moshiach. Why would Hashem do it in such an unpleasant way? Exactly right. Like I just said, I don't know why Hashem would do anything. Why can't he do it without the coronavirus? Why can't he do it without World War II and the Holocaust? Why couldn't he do it without Gimel Tammuz? I don't have an answer. To me, these are questions, not answers. But despite the question, that doesn't mean we stop what we have to do. As I said, we're soldiers. We march forward. We don't have answers. The Rebbe once wrote to somebody. Somebody asked the Rebbe, why bad things happen. So the Rebbe said, we don't ask why. And we don't say what's going to be. You know what we say? What can we do about it? You hear? Think about that. It's an unbelievable lesson in life. We don't ask why it happened, because we don't know in most cases. We don't say, what can I do? As a victim says, what can I do? We ask one question, what can I do about it? I'm sorry, I should rephrase it. We don't talk like a victim that says, what will be, as if it's not in your power. And we don't ask why. We ask one question, what can I do about it? What can I do right now? What I have to do health-wise, physically health, and spiritual health, as we've been discussing at length. So to say these tzaros are signs, everything can be a sign. But no, I'd rather not go that direction. I would say we don't understand why it's happening this way, but we can ask, what are we going to do about it? And there's plenty we can do. We have opportunities now that we've never had. The whole world is asking. The whole world is right now aware of something. People are not complacent. They're not like it was a few weeks ago, a few months ago. People are receptive. So there's plenty to do. Reach out to as many people as possible. Share kind words. There's plenty of things to share. You don't have to create everything yourself. You can pass on something that you've seen, a nice word, a nice Torah, a warm, kind word. And you can reach to anyone, Jew, non-Jew. The world is ours. Thank God technology allows us to reach everybody anywhere. And in our own homes, there's so many opportunities of doing hopeful things, loving things, as I've been repeating a number of times. Next question. How do you do tshuva for past sins that you're no longer doing, but sometimes feel the temptation for it? Usually meaning you didn't do proper tshuva for it yet. Well, first of all, tshuva is on many levels. If you're not acting on a temptation, that's a great achievement. Don't minimize that. We all have temptations. Who doesn't have temptations? I'll be the first to admit I have many temptations. The question is whether you act on them. So the first tshuva is an action. Can we change our whole personality not to enjoy certain things in life? The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, the whole Tanya of a Beinoni means a Beinoni doesn't transform whether he'll have a temptation. He transforms his thought, speech, and action, that he doesn't act on it. He doesn't talk. He doesn't think about it. He distracts himself. But to have no temptation, I've yet not found a person that has no temptations. So I don't think you should be so harsh on yourself. You've done tshuva. Stick to controlling yourself. You have a temptation, distract yourself, find a way to harness it, find a way to... Even if, God forbid, you fall again, don't become, the Rebbe says many times, don't become overwhelmed by it. Fine, we're human beings. We all will make mistakes. It's what you do after the mistake, not that we'll make mistakes. You pick yourself up and say, you know what? I feel bad that I did it. I'm going to make sure not to do it again. I have people working for me. They make mistakes. I always tell them, everyone can make a mistake. Just learn from your mistake. Make sure you don't do it again. Implement measures to prevent a mistake now that you know that you have a weak spot. That's how human beings behave, and that's what's expected. Next question. Okay. How can we fill our minds and time productively when the people that surround us at home are filled with worry and fear? Excellent question. So, a few things. First of all, it's very important to always know this, a lesson in life in general. And for me, it's a major principle that I use a lot in my own work, in my own life. You have two choices in every given situation. Will you influence someone or will they influence you? Very often I come into a situation and people are very depressed, in a bad mood. You go to a party, not now, but there was a time. And you go and people are, just seeing a bad mood. So I made it very clear in my mind, based on how I've been trained and maybe my personality, where I come somewhere, I am not going to become like they are. If anything, I'm going to do whatever I can to lighten the mood. So the first thing is important to realize, you control your attitude. Even if you're surrounded by sad people or people who are afraid, and legitimately so. The first thing you have to do is close your eyes and look inside yourself. How can I be stronger? And not just stronger for them. Find ways to calm, to soothe. We're not talking about denial. We all understand that we're in a challenging time. People are worried about their jobs. They're worried about their income and, of course, about their health and health of family members. There are people who have God forbid, we have family members in hospitals. So, yes, I'm not suggesting, we're just oblivious, but still, there's still an attitude, let's see what we can do to be positive, to be more helpful. Because remember, if you get weak, you also weaken those around you. If someone's in a bad place, you don't want to become like them, because then you can't help them. If somebody's limping and you start limping, you're not going to be of help. Like a lifeguard who comes to save a drowning victim, if they allow themselves, they'll drown with the victim. So you have to brace yourself, compose yourself, find that presence of mind and heart to be strong. Sometimes you may need to turn to a friend, to an adult, someone you can call and say, in my home, things are really difficult right now. Can you give me some advice? Maybe you can talk to my father, to my mother. I don't have a magic pill to tell you in this situation, but I think it's vital. That's why I'm elaborating. That when people surround you at home and you can't go anywhere, are filled with worry and fear, you can't just tell them, don't be worried, but you have to be positive, be helpful, see where you can throw in a word. I think bringing that positive energy will some way help them as well. And be creative and be intelligent about it. If you can't do anything, try to somewhat go to your room or somewhat separate yourself so you don't have to be constantly under that toxic environment. And I am sure that you could find ways with love to talk to whoever, the parent or the sibling, privately and say, look, what can I do to help the situation? Let's try to turn it into something positive. Where are we here? Okay, we're ready at 11, but we'll go a little longer. I'm going to do a few more here, and then maybe we'll take some. That's what I did yesterday. Is that right? Let me ask the moderator here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. How can we encourage others and bring real hope? Okay, it's an extension of this last question. I'll tell you just a few tricks of the trade. One thing is to go back to something you enjoy. If there's a hobby you like, or there's something online, or a book you like, go back and try to gather more strength. Remember before I mentioned the Shamash and the Sati B'Tahedihi, the Rebbe says to immerse your neshama in water. You need to refresh yourself before you're going to refresh others. How do you refresh yourself? So for me, I love learning Chassidus. So I go to a Maimer Chassidus that I learn, or I'm going to teach. And then I reinvigorate myself, and it makes it a lot easier for me to convey a refreshing approach to others. So I would recommend, you want to give hope to others? First, give hope to yourself. Find a way of refreshing it. Read something that's inspiring, that's emotional or spiritual. Maybe a story from the Rebbe. I mentioned a few stories here today in this class. Go online, find something inspiring, share it on chat, Instagram, WhatsApp, whatever it is, the different platforms. These things tend to make a big difference. More light tends to weaken darkness. It's very hard to fight hopelessness by just saying, don't be hopeless. The way you fight hopelessness is by bringing a little hope. The way you fight darkness is by bringing a little light. The way you fight anger, you fight frustration is by bringing a little happiness, a little joy. There's always something positive. Tonight is Beis Nissan. Find a story from the Rebbe Rashab, Friedrich Rebbe, in challenging times. Share it. It takes a little effort, but that effort goes a tremendous way, firstly, to strengthen yourself, and secondly, to strengthen all those around you. What do you recommend is the smartest way to occupy one's time in such days when we don't know how long this will go on for? Well, I continue the theme. Occupy it. I think you should find diverse things. It's very hard to do one thing for a long time. If you like to read, if you like music, if you like to draw, art, if you like other hobbies, if you like to read or learn something, maybe it's a time to even think of, I don't want to say writing a book, but maybe collecting, making a compendium of nice stories. 2 weeks is Pesach. Maybe collect 10 beautiful stories that could be shared at the Pesach Seder, or even before that. These are projects. Find projects that are all life-inspiring, life-affirming, hopeful, positive, and we have plenty. Chassidus, the Rabbeim, is so rich with song, with music, with stories, with thoughts, with ideas. Whatever works for you. But makom shalibei chafetz. Find something that is close to you. Because if it's close to me, it may not be good for you. You have to find something that you are passionate about. And fill your day. This is the time. Look, we took for granted our lives. A few weeks ago, we could rely on, we go to school, we have our routines, we rely on it, and whether for good or for bad. Now you have to create your new routines, completely new. So I'm sure you have your school responsibilities to some extent, but now Pesach is coming, so we're starting with that. So now is the time to create new routines. Be creative. I'm thinking maybe we should run a contest. The most creative idea is what to do when you're quarantined. Maybe we can begin something like that. You heard it here first. So maybe if some of you make some suggestions, send them to me. I'll be happy to look at it, and maybe we can do something with that and also find a way to award you for it. Okay. I'm going to, let's see here. I did a lot of the questions. Let me do two more from the written, and then if there are any questions, I see some are on the chat, and I'll take it in a moment. Let me go here. What should we do if davening feels dry because you suddenly have all the time for it and it's not that highlight in the middle of a Rosh day? Welcome to the club. We all have this challenge. The answer to davening dry is very simple. Find one prayer. You don't have to make the whole davening passionate and exciting overnight. That's very hard to do. Find one tefillah. It could be Shema. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. I mentioned Echad, the emphasis. Find something Echad in your life. To make something from dry to exciting is applying it and personalizing it and making it relevant. Moida ani lefanecha. In the morning. Thank you for returning my neshama to me. Think about your neshama. This is a perfect time to do so. So I would suggest start small, find one tefillah, one prayer that speaks to you, personalize it, and every day you can choose a different tefillah or you can choose a different kavanah. And the rest of it, say as best as you can, but you can expand it. Once you make a prayer, remember, davening is avodah shebelev. It's an emotional expression. So it's personal, it's emotional. Emotionally and personalize any of the davening, and you'll be surprised how it can suddenly become from dry to something a little more exciting. How can you set real healthy boundaries and all yourself do truly be free and not tied to our devices or laziness? It's not so easy to do, but here's the key thing, especially for us Chassidim. The best way to set healthy boundaries and not be tied to our own devices and laziness, as you put it, is to connect to something greater than yourself. If you feel that you're a soldier in an army, if you feel you're an agent, an ambassador of light, that you were chosen by Hashem to be the Rebbe's shliach, shlucha, ambassador, messenger today, that is a very healthy, powerful force that fights laziness. Because if your job now is to wake up 6 o'clock in the morning, to get on the phone, to talk to someone in the hospital, because you give them some encouraging words, that's your mission. That will fight the laziness. If you don't have that mission, why should you wake up 6 o'clock in the morning? And I'm just using that as an example. So the powerful mission that we're committed to is the best way to counter laziness or our in general, our procrastination. There's always tomorrow. Who knows what, when? That's why I began at the opening. This is a time of urgency. Listen to this, girls. This is a time of urgency. It's a time that we have to rise to the occasion to show how Jews, Chassidim, the Rebbe's students, the Rebbe's children behave in a time of crisis. When you feel that, it's the best antidote and the best counterforce to laziness and our other natural so-called things we gravitate to that weaken our resolve and so on. And I'm going to do one more here. Any tips on how to have true Avos Yisrael? Real true Avos, yes. The first tip is to recognize that we're all in it together. We're not separate people. The Alter Rebbe in Perek Lamed Bey says that. We're not separate. Our bodies are separate. But especially today, when we're told to be alone, we can recognize that spiritually we're one. We're one organism. So to look at another person and say, you know what, that person's part of me. To recognize the neshama in that person, that's the key to Avos Yisrael. Because without that, you could say, I don't like that personality. I don't like her. She's obnoxious. She's selfish. She's narcissistic, etc. But when you say, 1 second, she has a neshama. Hashem put that neshama inside of her or him. And why did Hashem put that person? maybe for me to learn something, maybe I can grow through it. So obviously, Yisrael is directly connected to neshama connections. Okay. So I covered most of the questions, to be honest. I didn't think I'd cover so many. Let me do a few, and if anybody you want to put questions, I'm going to look now at the screen and try to answer a few questions. How do you own your Yiddishkeit? And 2, develop a taste in things to Jewish music, like Jewish music or Nugunim? Okay, very, very good question. Okay. Well, you own your Yiddishkeit. I mentioned before, and let me elaborate. It's a good point to make. In the Gemara, there's a question a student asks his teacher, where should I begin my journey? Where should I begin studying? And listen to the answer. He tells him, B'mokim shalibay chafetz, the place that your heart desires. Similar to when we say, Chanoich lenar al pi darkei, gam ki yaskin lo yosem mimenu. Educate the child according to his or her way. So when he gets older, he won't waver from it. What do you mean, api darkei? We teach people according to the derech of Torah mitzvahs, what Hashem says, not our way. But that's called owning it, personalizing it. That's when it lasts, because you own it. So you have to find your passion. A good teacher will teach ideas, will teach thoughts, but above all, they'll teach you to empower you that they should be yours, that you should own it. Not just they give you fish, they teach you how to fish. It's like methodology. It's teaching you not just facts, but how to find answers and find your personal way. Now, some of us, since your second question is about music, some of us are musical, creative. A good system of owning Yiddishkeit is find in music Yiddishkeit. Find in music Hashem. That's how you develop a taste for things. That's how you make it yours. Now you'll say a lot of Yiddishkeit has been taught to us in a very boring way, very mechanical, very dogmatic. Here are the rules. Well, that's what Chassidus comes to do, and the Rebbe particularly, to take that same Yiddishkeit and make it yours. It's not just a mechanical thing you do. Pesach is coming. We can sit by a Seder and just go through the motions and let's get over with it. Or you can look at each of the steps of the Seder and say, you know what? What lesson does it have for me now that we're quarantined? How can I become a person that's more free? How can I become more spiritual? How can I be kinder? But you have to ask that question. Unless you don't ask the question, what it means personally, you won't own it and it won't be enduring. You'll do it maybe to be yetzer, mechanically. But if you want to do something excited, it has to be part of your personality. I personally, for example, early on, when I was your age, I discovered I could write a bit. I thought I liked writing. I liked being creative and writing and speaking. I didn't know where it's going to go, but I did it. And it became my passion. I don't just do it as a job. I really love it. I love to communicate. I love to take ideas and Torah Chassidus and communicate them in a relevant way. I'm just using it as an example. Find something like that you can own and say, you know what, this is what I'm good at, and let me see how I can use my talent and skills for something, for Chassidus, for Torah, for spreading Yiddishkeit, for Yefutz Ma'anesecha Chutza. And the same thing with Chassidish music. Talk to someone who really appreciates song and music and say, tell me the message. Tell me the emotional feeling you have when you sing a song. You sing Tzoma L'cha Nafshi, Shamil, Stav Yapitu, other Chassidish Nigunim. Talk about it and you'll be surprised. People will share their sentiments. What do I feel when I hear this piece of music? Okay, another question. Okay, question. Second. How do we unify having bitachon in our life and going throughout our day? What's the balance? When do we rely on Hashem and also do the work? Okay, I believe I answered this question very early on in this program. I'll just briefly say the balance is, as I said before, with an example of a war. And I mean a spiritual war, not a physical war. The balance is, Hashem said, I'm giving you all the resources you need to deal with your challenges. Some of them include physical resources, seichel, going to people that are experienced. So when it comes to a health issue, the Torah says, "V'rapi yerape, nitn reshus l'reifa l'rapis," to go to a doctor. You say, why do I go into a doctor? Why don't I use my betochen to go to Hashem? Because Hashem said to go to the doctor. The doctor is Hashem's messenger. The Rebbe once told a chassid who wrote to the Rebbe for advice, and the Rebbe answered, "Katsas yedidim mevinim," like the advice of your friends who understand, mevinim, expert friends. So he wrote back to the Rebbe, "I don't want their advice. I want the Rebbe's advice." So the Rebbe answered him. He says, "Vos artir as ich der empferen durch yedidim mevinim." Why do you mind that I'll answer you through expert friends? The Eibishter wants certain answers to come through doctors. So he blesses the doctor. That's not a kstira to betoch, that is betoch. And then there are things Hashem says that in addition to that, daven, say tehillim, trust in me. So even if a doctor did everything he could possibly do, and you did everything you possibly do, there's still Hashem's brachas. That's the balance. We're not reckless where we say we don't need doctors, we don't need experts, we just sit, like the famous story, the guy who refused to leave the drowning city. He says he's waiting for Hashem. And then unfortunately he drowns, and Hashem says to Hashem, "What happened? I was the only one that trusted you." Hashem said, "I sent a helicopter 3 times to save you, and you refused to go because you said you're waiting for a God. I sent those helicopters." The second half is not to be say natural doctors will save the world. No, they're not God. They're not miracle makers. They are messengers. So true balance is knowing that Hashem runs the world, but at the same time, the way He runs it is to use all the resources we have. And once you've done whatever you can do, and you could honestly and peacefully say, "I've done what I can do," now I have calm and betochen because I did what I can do, and I can tell Hashem, "I did my part, now I do your part." That's the general healthy attitude. Basically, faith is not the absence of reason. Faith is not a crutch that we escape to when we're desperate. Faith is an additional tool, in addition to reason, in addition to using all the natural means. Faith is an additional tool that's super rational, that's beyond seichel, that says, in addition to everything I can do naturally, I also have trust and faith in something greater than myself that will help me. Okay. How should I plan for my life, yet be anticipating Moshiach at any given moment? Okay. So the Rebbe quite cites the Frierdiker Rebbe asking a very basic question. On one hand, we're told Moshiach is about to come any second. On the other hand, the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe told us to build moistus, send shluchim all over the world, and not just to rent buildings. They built empires. They built yeshivas, schools, shuls, organizations. Built, meaning they bought or they actually built something permanent. So you'd think if Moshiach is about to come any second, we should be standing with our packed bags at the door, or at least near our beds. And as soon as Moshiach comes, we're ready to go. Some people, when they heard Moshiach was coming years ago, they waited by the train stations. We don't see the Rebbe saying that. So how do you reconcile, on one hand, Moshiach any second, on the other hand, we're planning our lives. We're planning Pesach. We have organizations. We have shuls. Whatever the plans are. Now it's true, our plans have all been upended. But still. And the Rebbe answered, the Frierdiker Rebbe answered that when the Jews traveled in the Midbar, remember they traveled with the Mishkan. But the Mishkan was portable. It had to be assembled and disassembled. How did they know when to stop and when to travel? So it says the Eibishter told them that when the cloud came down, that's when they stopped. When the cloud went up, that's when they traveled. So the pasuk says, Al pi Hashem, that's when you'll know, according to God's instruction. When God tells you, Al pi Hashem yisu, you travel. Al pi Hashem yachnu, you rest. Just like I mentioned before, now Hashem wants us to be in our homes. That's Al pi Hashem. It's as holy and sacred as when Hashem says, go outside and go to shul. So the Frierdiker Rebbe answered that when it's Al pi Hashem, even if it's for one moment, it has a certain permanence. That's what the Gemara says. Even if it's for a moment, but because Hashem wants you right now to be there, you have to act as if it's a permanent thing. So even though we're waiting for Moshiach and anticipating every second, but the moment you're here, you have to work as if you're here completely. Because as long as Hashem keeps you here in this place, you have to do everything possible. Build organizations, permanently live there, knowing full well that any second Hashem can come and say, okay, now I'm saying we're moving on, and we're going into the Geula. This is sometimes sounds like a paradox, but it's the paradox of life of people who are both in the moment, but they also know that they're ready when the next moment will come. But you don't compromise the moment. It's like when you're taking care of your little child. You don't say, hey, we got to go on a trip or something. Right now, you're taking care of your child. Be there completely with your child. Right now, we're at home. Let us be there completely in the most loving way. The day will come soon, shortly, where we'll be opened up, and hopefully life will go back to a more normal and balanced way. But right now, this is what's expected of us. So we do both things together. We live our lives in rational, seichel way, like I said before. That's also part of what Hashem wants. At the same time, we know in our hearts that Moshiach can and will come any given moment. That's the answer to that. Next question. How do you recommend staying connected to your Yiddishkeit during this unstructured time? Okay. Well, I think throughout this hour, 20 minutes so far, I've given many suggestions. Look, Yiddishkeit is not just the things we do. I mentioned before, it's not just dogmatic, mechanical acts. I'm sure we all have our habits and our routines. We have what they call robotic Judaism. But Yiddishkeit really, in its truest sense, what the Rebbe teaches us, Chassidus teaches us, is passion, passionate Yiddishkeit. So let me rephrase your question. How do you recommend staying passionate during this unstructured time? Well, when you're passionate about your mission, you're passionate about your mission of bringing light to the world in some way, so you become creative. I mentioned a few ways that I've done it. I'm using online, obviously, big time, because that's the only way you can really communicate now. Trying to create new programs, trying to create short pieces, trying to share. Here, sharing, sitting with you here in Zoom. And finding ways to bring Yiddishkeit into new creative manners. I would say in this unstructured time, it's actually, in that sense, excellent, because you're no longer in the box. A month ago, everything was very organized. I couldn't just go and do a Zoom conference with Beth Rivkah High School middle of the morning, Or today I'm going to be doing a Zoom Fabringen International with South Africa, Israel, and Australia, and a few places. It wasn't even possible. People were busy, everyone in their own time zone. Tonight I'm doing something on the West Coast Zoom. I'm just giving some examples. So there's unbelievable opportunities when there's no structure, because you could do things in different time zones. People are not working. They have more free. People are also more needy. They're more receptive. So you have to find, look, I really tell you, this is an opportunity. I don't want to say of a lifetime, because Rahman al-Islam is coming through a negative way, but it has tremendous opportunities. You are all, you're going to be, you're 11th, 12th graders. In a year or two, you'll be finishing school, or maybe a few more years, whatever it is. So, this is an opportunity where you can use your creative, original ideas and maybe come up with something really cool. Do something online. Do a little video of yourself, maybe with a friend on Zoom, some interesting words. I would challenge you. You tell me. If someone came to you and said, what should I do? I'm bored. Coronavirus has isolated me. I'm living alone in this quarantine place. My whole family's on top of each other. Give me 3 creative ideas of things I can do. I guarantee you, if I challenge you that way, you'd come up with some ideas. Because we're always good at giving advice to others. Remember, it's always easier than giving advice to yourself. So there's a lot of opportunity, if you really apply yourself, to really take this time and this free time and do things. Children need entertainment. Teenagers need it. Adults. I mean, everybody is now in a place where they've completely out of their comfort zone. So this is time to either, as I said earlier, you lie down and say, I can't do anything, God forbid, or you rise to the occasion and find something creative. I cannot believe, honestly, that among all of you, every one of you, I assure you, could do something that's unique and interesting. And I'm not talking about winning Nobel Prizes or something. We're talking about something that will help people. That's all it comes down to. There are people in hospitals. There are people, families that are very hurt right now. They're needy. Find ways. Find something kind, some original idea. Now, again, it doesn't have to be original. It just has to be something that works. And I'm seeing different ideas. People are doing different things. People sending packages, people offering services. There are elderly people at home that can't go out at all, to bring them maybe something. I mean, I know that's already out there. Maybe to talk to, maybe find yourself like a, what do they call it? A pen pal. I don't know what it's called today. Maybe someone a little younger that you can mentor a bit, keep them busy for an hour a day so they can not make their families crazy at home. It could be a relative, it could be a stranger, it doesn't matter. I think if you offer yourself to others, there's so many ways that we can be of help. And this does not mean your whole life is that's all you do all day. You still can do what you're doing, but you're adding something unique. And I am sure Hashem will see and watch that very closely. It's, I think, the best way we can respond and show, you know what, we're not lying down and dying here. We're not retreating. We're not becoming terrified. We're going to rise to the occasion. We're going to do what we need to do. Now, I don't know what the curfew here is, but until the moderator doesn't stop me, I'll just continue. Is that right? We got nowhere to go anyway, unless you have another class coming. Let me see here. Okay, I see similar type of question about B'tochen. Is it wrong for a frum Lubavitch girl to go to college after getting married if this girl would like to become a professional in a certain field? Not trying to make a tumult with a college issue, but what do you think about going to college after marriage? It's interesting timing, this question, when all the colleges have closed down. So, okay, but I understand it's a question in general. But it's interesting because I'll tell you what, I mean, it's a bigger topic, but I'll just say something short about it. I go back, I feel the biggest gift we have is that we were blessed to be shluchim and shluchos of the Rebbe. And the Rebbe told us what our mission in this world is. And our mission is, as I said, Deir Ashvi, to v'shechanti b'seicham, to bring the Shekhinah down to this world, each in our own unique way. Now, when I say shlichus, I don't just mean going to a city in the regular conventional sense. Even right now, when you're at home and you do something in the spirit that I just described earlier, you're being a shliach or a shlucha. You're doing a mission in this unique time of bringing godliness to some other person or to yourself or to your family. This is a driving mission. Now you'll say, okay, that's beautiful, but I can't make money from that. I go to college, I can get myself a degree, and I could have a higher salary. Well, you know what? This moment in time with the coronavirus is teaching a lot of people that all their college degrees aren't worth much because most of them are being laid off. Now, I'm not suggesting a person shouldn't find opportunities. I just want to say when you have the choices ahead of you and you haven't yet made a choice, if we have parents, and all of us, parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts, who are in a particular profession. They may be a doctor, a lawyer, computer programmer, an accountant, etc. So God bless them. That's their shlichus and so on. But if you're asking me as 11th and 12th graders, where you have your whole future ahead of you, and especially this time, what should be your focus? Your focus is to find your soul's mission in this world and find ways to make parnasa from it. It's absolutely possible because people need it. I can tell you right now that people need, in many ways, more psychological, emotional, spiritual help than they even need doctors. Now, I'm not taking away the need for the doctors. Don't get me wrong. We need that. There's a virus out there. So my point is, if you're asking me the question, lechatchila, in the best possible scenario, is to try to be a soul doctor, to try to be a soldier and a messenger of bringing Moshiach, of bringing Geula, and so on. Now, whatever ends up happening in your life and you find a certain thing, God bless you. I am not telling you what to do or not to do. But if you're asking me, this is the approach I would generally take. And you should probably talk to someone for more details. Okay, next question. If all the doctors say there's nothing to do and to build your life around your limitations, then it seems to be a form of denial to believe that somehow the situation will miraculously change over. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I assume you're referring to the coronavirus. Well, doctors are saying they don't know much. That's what they're saying. They're saying that right now we know that it's a contagious disease. Elderly people and people who are at risk are especially in danger. So that's why let's do everything possible to avoid the spread quicker than necessary. to try to lower the curve, as they call it, spread it out. And that's why we're doing what we're doing, to be prudent, not to harm anyone else. You could be a young person and have very minimal symptoms. I've had the symptoms, but thank God they're mostly gone. But I'm not going to expose someone else. And that's what they're saying. Miracles? Listen, Hashem can do whatever he wants. He could, just like he brought it, he can make it leave. Right now, we have to be following what the doctors say. And all the doctors say, this will go away. There's no way a virus stays forever. Whether they find a vaccine at some point, or at some point people get immunized because they had it and they got through it, and hopefully with the least amount of aggravation. So I'm not positive what you're asking. I'm not saying, no one's sitting around and saying, let's wait for a miracle. We're doing whatever we can. And that's what the halacha also says. It says, don't wait for a miracle. Quarantine yourself when there's a plague and make sure that you're protected and everyone around you is protected. How do you have true kibbud av v'em? You can imagine one of the reasons it's such a big mitzvah, and one of the reasons it's placed in the Aseres HaDibros, the 10 Commandments, is because it's not an easy mitzvah. We all know this. One of the reasons it's difficult is because our parents we take for granted. We live with them all our lives. Even before our memories, they're the ones that brought us into the world. You were in your mother's womb for 9 months. As a little child, you were nurtured, protected, taken care of by our parents. And I'm speaking, of course, in healthy situations. So in a way, we take for granted our greatest blessings. The people who completely committed their lives to us. Can you imagine? We should be thanking them all the time. Not because they're perfect, but because of their sacrifices. But because we're so close to them, we take it for granted. So the answer the Torah says is don't take things for granted. You have parents. Bless them. I remember, I have a story in Torah Meaning for Life. So a young woman who had a falling out with her mother. And they didn't speak to each other. She wouldn't speak to her mother for years. She was in Yechidus by the Rebbe. Listen to this. And she tells the Rebbe that me and my mother are not speaking. The Rebbe got so disturbed. The Rebbe said to him, my mother has passed away several years ago. The Rebbe's mother, Rebbe Tzachana, passed away in 1964. Vav Tishrei, Tov Shel Chav Hei. The Rebbe said, you know what I would do to be able to be with my mother again? And you're telling me your mother's here and you don't speak to her? We all know the kibbud aim the Rebbe showed every day going to visit his mother and all the other stories. But what is the Rebbe's lesson? Is obviously we're not a Rebbe. We all are human beings and we have our frustrations and we have our petty complaints. But let's be honest. Let's step back right now. There are people, God forbid, have died from this disease. It's a time of life and death. There are people, thank God, God should protect everybody. But this is not a simple time. People are challenged in so many ways. You know what your father's going through? He has to think about his job. He has to make sure you're secure. You think he's going to tell you all his feelings? Your mother's going through. Pesach is coming. So I think this is a time of introspection. We got to step back and say, 1 second. My parents are not perfect. No parent is perfect. And you will not be perfect when you will be a parent. But they're my parent. And as a matter of fact, that Tzemach Tzedek writes in the time of a magefa, of an epidemic, he wrote one of the things that's a sgula for Arichas Yomim is kibbud av v'em. To emphasize that in a letter, the Tzemach Tzedek writes that back in the 1800s. So I would say this is a good time to step back and not take for granted everything. Will we be perfect? Try the best you can. And there's nothing wrong. After this, maybe go over to your mother or your father and say, I want to share something. Just express appreciation. Sometimes gratitude doesn't have to have a reason. It doesn't have to be because you did something for me 5 minutes ago. It's a very healthy thing to do. It's a very empowering thing. It's a very leadership thing to do. You initiate. And I can go on. And I have parents myself. My father is already an Elam Emes. So I know the challenge. We all have our challenges. But that doesn't mean we cannot step back and think about it and do something about it, especially in these trying times. Okay. Next question. Is our system's dependence on yichus or being overly protective of a reputation wrong? After all, shouldn't we be making decisions because it is the right or wrong thing to do, not because you don't want to ruin your name, whether for seminary or shidduchim? Okay, good question. And I see a follow-up question about Kibbud Av V'Em just came. I'll do it afterwards. So to answer this question, it's an excellent question. To be perfectly blunt and direct, as the Rebbe said to quite a few people, but he said once to George Rohr. George Rohr said to the Rebbe, he runs a beginner service in a shul, I think in KJ, Lincoln Square, wherever it was. The Rebbe said, what? So he thought the Rebbe didn't hear. We all know when the Rebbe said what, it means he heard something he didn't like. So he says again, I run a beginner service. The Rebbe again, what? And the Rebbe said, beginner? Who's a beginner? So he says, these are beginners. These are Jews who don't know how to daven. So the Rebbe said, there's no such a thing as a beginner Jew. He's a Ben Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Bas, Sarah, Rivkah, Rachel, and Leah. So let's make it very clear here. When it comes to yichus, we all have excellent yichus. We all go back to Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivkah, Rachel, and Leah. I don't think it gets better than that. The fact that you find, why do families find yichus? A lot of it, frankly, is quite superficial. I'll be very honest. People, they're very into vanity, into ego, what they look like. Let's be honest, people are. Why do we say sheker achein vehevel hayefi ki im isha yiras Hashem hitasala? What, there's nothing wrong with chen and yefi? The Rebbe once told a former beauty queen from Israel, walked by the Rebbe by dollars, and she said she was a former beauty queen, and she wants a bracha for a shidduch. So then she walked by, the Rebbe called her back and said, what it says, sheker achein vehevel hayefi, doesn't mean chen and yefi are not important. Remember, yefas teyar, Yefas Mara is a quality, a virtue that Torah speaks about the Imaz. Chen, Noyech Motza Chen B'nei Hashem. Chen is grace, it's beautiful. How could the Torah say Shekin and Hevel? Because without Isha Yiras Hashem, because if it's only external, superficial beauty, then it's folly, it's empty, it's hollow. But if there's Yiras Hashem, there's a pneumistic thing. Person has an inner glow, an inner personality, then the beauty and the chen and the yefi are all enhanced by it, and it's all connected. The same thing here, being focused on superficial, exactly what kind of family it is it going to look good for the pictures? Unfortunately, a lot of people are into reputations. And, I remember a boy telling me once, he said to me, he left his home many years ago. He says, my father told me, the way you behave embarrasses me. You know what it's doing for my reputation? And the boy said to his father, what about me? You don't think about me. You're thinking about your reputation. It actually alienated this boy in a horrible way. I don't want to go into the details. Reputation is good to have a Shem Tev. You earn it. When you behave nicely, you get a good personality. I know people who may not have the yichus, so-called, but they're the most beautiful neshamas on earth. And I'd marry into their families in a moment. So sometimes it comes to as the focus on externals, on money, on externals and reputation, or on the personality. Now, if you hear somebody has a terrible personality, then you can look at that. But to focus purely on reputation, no. The idea of the stigmas around Baal Tshuva or even a ger, you have to recognize, you have to look at a person for who they are. And you have to look at the whole package, not just a specific thing. So yes, I absolutely believe there's an overemphasis and unhealthy emphasis on externals, because people sometimes can be superficial and external. I'm not pointing fingers at anyone individually. It's an opportunity for all of us to look a little deeper and look for someone that's a full, complete person. That's the most important thing. And remember, yichus goes straight to the Ovis and Moas and to Hashem himself. Following up the question about parents, what about Kibbud Av V'Em? What about Kibbud Av V'Em in a unhealthy situation? Like when parents rely on their children for emotional needs. How can a child set limits without being disrespectful? It's very emotionally taxing and draining, and telling the parent that doesn't accomplish anything. Okay. I'm glad you asked the question, because unfortunately some of us are in this situation. I would just broaden the question. What about parents who are abusive? What about Kibbud Av V'Em there? So I'll answer both questions the same way. The interesting thing in the Pasuk, it says, Kibbud Av, Kabed es avicha v'simecha. Why the word kabed? To honor. Why not oyev? You should love your parents. There's another Pasuk says to fear them, to be respectful to them. But why kabed? Why not love them? We say, V'ahavta re'echa kamecha. The Torah says, love your fellow. So you can't say love your parents. Because the Torah was very wise, coming from Hashem, obviously. It's saying, you honor your parents. You know why? Not because they're just your parents and they deserve your honor. It's because you're honoring Hashem through honoring them. Now, you know the luchis, the 10 commandments, right? Seres hadibris, were on 2 luchis, 2 tablets. 5 on one and 5 on the other. Where's kibud avim? On the first one. It's the 5th commandment and the first tablet. The first tablet is distinguished by ben adam lamokim, the mitzvahs between you and God. The second are between you and another, like leisignev, leisitzach, not to steal, not to murder, not to covet, etc. Why is kibud avim ben adam lamokim? Honor your parents seems like between man and man, between person and person. So the Torah says the reason is very straightforward. Because you're honoring your parents because God gave you life through your parents. You're really honoring God. That's why there's a halacha that if your parents tell you to do something that is the opposite of Shulchan Aruch, and what Hashem says, you're not supposed to listen to them. Why not? Kibud avim? Because they're honoring them is not because they're great people. They're honoring them because they brought life to you. And it's the decent thing to do. They were the channels for which God gave you life. This applies even to parents, Rahman al-Itzlan. I don't want to even say it, especially now. Parents who are very unhealthy, very abusive even, because they still brought you life. So that's why the Torah doesn't say love, because love is optional. If they actually treated you in a loving way and so on, then for sure love them as well. But the minimal is honor. You're honoring your own life by honoring your parents, because you're honoring the life that you got from them. Even if they themselves, God forbid, became vehicles that are not completely healthy. But it did come through them. The bracha came to them. So if you dishonor your parents, you're really dishonoring your life, which is why the pasuk continues, Laman yarichun yamecha. Why is it the only mitzvah the Torah says, because of that you live forever? What does it have to do? Because you're honoring your life when you honor your parents, and therefore you live longer. That's even the worst case scenario. So say, how do you honor such parents? You know what? Maybe sometimes, and it's painful to say, sometimes you can't be around parents that are unhealthy. Hopefully nobody on this call is that way. But there are people whose parents are really harmful to them. So you could honor them by sitting in your own room and saying Tehillim for them and for the neshama that God should protect them. Honor doesn't always mean on their terms. Honor means that you always remember that they gave you life and you respect that. That doesn't mean you love them. It doesn't mean that everything else is in place. So now let's go back to your question. You honor your parents because they gave you life. Now, if your parents are dysfunctional or unhealthy or toxic in some way, like in this case, you say that they're emotionally weak and they turn to children for emotional nurturing, and you recognize that, which is a wisdom that I have to commend you for, then no, you don't have to tell your parents, hey, you're emotionally unhealthy, you're toxic, and you should go to a therapist or to a psychiatrist. There's ways. You have to be wise. You have to create real strong boundaries. And like, a parent says something, you see that they're, let's say, playing children against each other. Or you see they're looking to you for something you shouldn't be giving them. So either in a kind way say, you know what, I think that's not an appropriate thing for me to do. Or you deflect it. You have to be wise and diplomatic. Now, if the problem is severe, you may need to talk to a third party to get advice, because you can't be expected as a child you're not your parents' therapist. You can't be expected to heal them. So I think kibud, kavod here goes very, very subjective and has to be tailored to the situation, where kavod would mean, let me see what I can do. I'm not going to insult. I'm not going to hurt. But it does not mean I have to do everything my parent asks me to do, especially if it's unhealthy. Now, if you're in doubt, you should talk to an objective party that you can trust and say, here's something my mother wants me to do, but I think it's not coming from a healthy place. Sometimes you do it anyway. And that, you get over it. Sometimes you don't. It's case by case. I can't really give a full formula here and prescription what to do, because each situation is different. But the point I want to make is Torah is much more complex and much more comprehensive and sophisticated than people think. It's not just honor your parents, period. How you honor them the right way, right situation. Obviously, we're clear we don't hurt our parents. And we're not looking to do anything, God forbid, to reciprocate, even if they hurt us. And as I go back again, remember, you're honoring God, you're honoring life, you're honoring yourself. Many people who can't honor their parents really also loathe themselves. They loathe themselves. They don't like themselves. That's not what you want. You want to be able to love yourself and to see what you can do with your parent. Each parent is different. Hopefully, God blesses that all of you have healthy parents. No one's perfect, but they're healthy. Those that have more challenges, I definitely advise that you talk to somebody because it'll help you. People who are more experienced, who may give advice, they may be a little more objective, especially when you get upset and so on. And we're talking about this topic, even though it's not directly coronavirus related, but in some ways it is, because whatever is happening in our lives now is amplified because we're now in our homes and we're there all the time. And whenever you're together for a long time, it brings out sometimes the best in people, but could also bring out the worst in us. So this is a time where it's important to address all of these issues and questions. As a matter of fact, next week I'm going to be doing a Facebook class about quarantines and marriage, how you can use this time not to create more tension, but to create more love and so on. But that's not really for you guys because you're not married yet, but the ideas have a lot of overlap. So let's see here. Okay, so I'm being told this should be the last question. Let me just conclude with a very bracha and a short line again. We are living in extraordinary times. We didn't ask for it. We didn't expect it. We don't want it even. But we, as real Chassidim and as real Jews, have to do what our ancestors, what our Jews did from the beginning of time, and especially as Chassidim and soldiers of the Rebbe, to rise to the occasion and really shine. Be the best you can be. This is the time. Bring out skills that you never thought you had. That's what challenges do. It's like the pressure on an olive. The best oil is produced when you pressure it. So this is a time of pressure, but it can bring out the best in us. And that's what we need to do. Make the Rebbe proud, make our parents proud, make our families proud, make the Yudhi Kalal Yisrael proud, make the Eibishter proud, to the point that the Eibishter will respond quickly. And as we go from this Rosh Chodesh Nissan, it should be a true Geula Dika month. I just saw a note from the Rebbe. The Rebbe just wrote a note I just saw. Then the month of Nissan, let me read it to you. It's a very powerful little note. You don't mind? Let me just find it. 1 second. I want to just read the actual language. Okay, I don't see it. Basically, I'll say it from memory. The Rebbe writes that since the month of Nissan, which is the month of Geula, there's no room, and should leave no room for anything that's opposite of Chodesh, of inner freedom and health and everything that we need now. So may this month be a true Chodesh HaGeula, b'Nissan Nigalu, b'Nissan Asid Ligal. In the month of Nissan, we were redeemed. In the month of Nissan, we will be redeemed. The Geula Mitzvah Vashlema, just even immediately now, today, Rosh Chodesh, and all these issues should go away as if they were never there in the first place. We should only have healthy, beautiful lives filled with simcha and be able to march into Pesach. The Geula Mitzvah Vashlema, b'Korev Mamish Mamish.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Jacobson, for giving us so much food for thought, inspiration, and motivation in this time. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
This program is brought to you by My Life, Chassidus Applied. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at chassidusapply.com/donate.